burning elephants to make them dance, leasing out an elderly black woman like a slave despite slavery being illegal, outlawing birth control for the entire state of Connecticut. These are all things that P.T. Barnum has done. And look what the YouTube algorithm has made me do. Your TikTok brain-rotted brain has made me place the blame for all of this on Hugh Jackman, dude. You think I wanted to put Hugh Jackman as the face of this video? No. But it's probably one of the only reasons you clicked. You should feel ashamed of yourself. Today we are talking about the atrocities of P.T. Barnum. They live in my head rent-free. So I decided that today I would just make a little video about the atrocities that this man committed in the name of showmanship. P.T. Barnum was the ringmaster and mastermind behind the Barnum and Bailey Circus. The Barnum and Bailey Circus is a staple piece of Americana. That's weird. The Barnum and Bailey Circus is a staple piece of Americana throughout American history that lasted from 1841 to 1919. It's been praised as this beautiful, amazing, fantastic display of creativity and showmanship and has been venerated in musicals, movies, and TV shows alike. But the reality of the Barnum and Bailey Circus was that it was a freaking nightmare, and an exploitative one at that. The Barnum and Bailey Circus originated as a freak show, and this freak show generally exploited people and things that didn't need to be. Some of the exhibits included the Fiji mermaid, which wasn't actually a mermaid and wasn't actually spelled like the island Fiji, it was spelled like the Bee Gees. Yeah, it wasn't all a mermaid or anything of the sort, it was actually just a taxidermied monkey sewn to the bottom half of a taxidermied fish. So, the sideshow also featured Chang and Ang, two conjoined twins from Siam, modern-day Thailand, which also perpetuates the stereotype that all conjoined twins are called Siamese twins. But also a man who was known as Zip the Pinhead, who was claimed by P.T. Barnum to be the missing link, when in reality, he was just a developmentally disabled black man that was dressed up in furs. So, how did P.T. Barnum get his start collecting disabled and developmentally disabled people and putting them on the road like some kind of weird sideshow? Even though slavery had been abolished, in 1835, legal loopholes allowed P.T. Barnum to lease out an elderly black woman as a part of his show. Joyce Heth was 61 years old at the time, but P.T. Barnum claimed that she was 161 years old and was the wet nurse of George Washington. This drew a huge crowd. Why would that draw a crowd? Guys, this woman breastfed George Washington. That'll really get him in. And it did. This defies all logic for me. After completely fabricating the entire life story of Miss Joyce Heth, P.T. Barnum also forced her to work 10 to 12-hour days, even as a 61-year-old woman in 1835. These exhibitions were considered labor-intensive and were completely based on foundations of racism, so that's inherently problematic for anybody, especially that, though, of a 61-year-old woman. But when you think the horrors end there, P.T. Barnum was just getting started. Inevitably, Miss Joyce Heth passed away, so you'd think at least that this torturous mockery of this woman could end after she died, but unfortunately, P.T. Barnum had other plans, and he charged 50 cents per person to watch her public autopsy. That's right, P.T. Barnum dissected this woman in front of everybody and claimed that she was 161 years old, when in reality, she was just a normal woman. Sick. After severely profiting from this kind of sideshow work, P.T. Barnum was able to move on to larger projects, which is when he began more sideshows. That's where he started collecting, quote-unquote, exhibitions like Chang and Ang and Zip the Pinhead, who were all just really normal people with birth defects. By 1871, he had built a curiosities museum and continued on with his sideshow work until eventually he was able to create this menagerie of animals and people who are willing to do stunts, and that's how the beginnings of the Great American Circus got their foundation. And if you think this guy just was an anti-humanitarian who hated people, I have bad news for you. He also treated animals with the same disgraceful behavior. In P.T. Barnum's menagerie were 11 imported elephants from Sri Lanka, which one of them died en route due to suffocating overseas conditions. Oh my god. He even created a method of controlling the animals called the burning method, which included shoving a hot poker up the elephant's trunk, forcing it to dance and do other performances. He most famously owned an elephant named Jumbo in 1885, who mysteriously died beneath a train. I wonder who orchestrated that. And again, even after the elephant's death, P.T. Barnum did not stop turning animal cruelty into his hot ticket to success, as he sold the elephant skeleton to the highest bidder and had the elephant taxidermied, in which the dead elephant toured the country for people who had never seen an elephant before. Many people will try to tell you that the circus life was this empowering experience for people who wouldn't typically be able to get jobs in a time period where people with disabilities were heavily discriminated against. But in reality, it was just an exploitative effort for some famous guy to get famouser and richer off the expense of people who were basically being tortured. And while there is truth in that statement that people with disabilities enjoyed circus life because they were able to make money, it's not exactly something that you should just go around saying like, oh, it was good for them because they were able to, make a living and they wouldn't have been able to make a living regularly. At the end of the day, they're still being exploited and basically tortured, so I don't really think that's an okay thing to say. Just because there's some truth behind it doesn't mean that it was the truth, so throwing that out there. Circuses have always been problematic up until recently, and sometimes they still are. P.T. Barnum later on expanded his business ventures into more interesting territory, including rodeos. He bought several emaciated bison calves for $500 a pop and decided that he was going to find a way to make his money back on these living creatures. So on August 31st of 1843, Barnum organized a free buffalo rodeo, encouraging people to come and visit. But don't think that he was doing this out of the goodness of his heart, because despite the rodeo itself being free, he had secretly bought up all of the ferries in the area, all of the tollways, and all of the concession stands, and made it to where in order to even get to the rodeo, you would have to be paying him fare. More than 24,000 people showed up. There were so many people there that people were clinging to the ferry rails trying to see the famous buffalo rodeo. The buffalo calves were eventually goaded into a stampede, which injured many of the crowded people. It was a complete train wreck. And despite several people getting nearly trampled and injured, and one man died falling from a tree trying to escape the stampede, the crowd still overwhelmingly loved it. Can these guys do like a Sudoku puzzle or something? The P.T. Barnum or Barnum and Bailey Circus continued on until 1919. P.T. Barnum decided that the best route for him would be politics, and I bet you didn't know that. He ran for office in the state of Connecticut, and to no one's surprise, he was a well-loved candidate. But that doesn't mean that he was a good candidate. He was elected to Connecticut legislature in 1865 as the Bridgeport mayor, and the most infuriating part of all is that he was seen as a champion for civil rights. My God! He claimed to be an advocate for immigration and African American people's rights in a time where they were limited. Yeah, this is the same guy who leased out a black woman for his own personal little freak show so that people could poke fun at her and ogle at the idea that she wet nursed George Washington. This is the same guy who did all of that stuff, claiming that he is an advocate for African American rights. And at the same time, despite being pro-African American suffrage, he also demanded for the Christianization of native peoples of Africa, China, and Native Americans, because they could only really be supported if they were Christians, I guess, completely erasing their original religions and cultures. I don't understand how this is making any sense, dude. The same guy who exploited marginalized groups like disabled, minorities, is claiming to be a civil rights advocate on his platform to run for office. And that's not anything new. Okay, it's not anything surprising. We see that even today. But it is a little bit shocking that someone who made their entire living and livelihood on the exploitation of marginalized groups is claiming to be a civil rights activist. That's what I find absolutely horrifying. He eventually made it past mayor and made it to the Connecticut State Senate. Despite egging on deeply problematic behavior at his circuses and sideshows, he also became a huge advocate of the temperance movement, aka the prohibition movement. And while he was known to have a glass of whiskey or scotch in his younger days, by the 1840s he had sworn off almost all alcohol. And in his circuses, where people were pointed at, jeered at, exploited, and animals were burned and forced to perform, he also hosted plays like The Drunkard, showing the dangers of overindulgent alcohol consumption. His museum banned alcohol around it or inside of it, and he also gave anti-alcohol lectures at his circuses and museums. That wasn't even the only thing he was against. As a Connecticut state senator in 1879, P.T. Barnum also headed a movement banning all forms of birth control in the state. Any kind of up-and-coming contraceptive, like drugs, materials, or instrument, according to him, would be banned, and anyone who is found owning it should be fined. There was even a potentiality for people who were found with these contraceptive devices to be imprisoned or jailed. And the law didn't just criminalize these birth control instruments for single, unmarried women, but for married couples as well, criminalizing both the man and the wife. This law of not being able to own birth control in any shape or form wasn't overturned until 1965, making condoms illegal, but then shoving hot pokers up elephants' trunks and forcing developmentally and physically disabled people to dance and perform for your sideshow. Seems like a strange set of priorities to follow, but to each their own, I guess. I guess the reason I'm making this video is because so many people find the era of the Barnum and Bailey circus to be this romantic and mysterious and whimsical time in dark American history. In reality, it was just disgusting. This man burned and abused animals and poked them with hot pokers, forcing them to perform. Tokenized and leased a woman named Joyce Heth, despite slavery not even being legal. Claimed to be a civil rights advocate. Banned birth control and intimate privacy. Organized a deadly buffalo stampede. Tried to abolish and banish all non-Christian religions. Killed several elephants. But still, if you look up information on P.T. Barnum, what comes up? What comes up? I dare you to Google it right now. It says he wasn't really evil, he was more of an opportunist. What? This dude was sadistic. To this day, Hollywood, internet sources, historians try to coin him as this humanitarian with big, great, amazing showman ideas, when even the basis of his showmanship relied on loopholes so that he could continue to keep a freed woman as a slave. Various forms of media still celebrate P.T. Barnum as this redeemable guy, and no, this is nothing to do with Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman, I love you. I'm a huge fan. I don't think it's your fault that you played P.T. Barnum in The Greatest Showman with Zendaya. It's just so hard for me to see him as this opportunistic guy who has these redeemable qualities, when even after his notoriety as the owner of the Barnum and Bailey circus kind of ended and he moved on to his life of politics, he still was exploiting people and trying to control people that he had no business controlling. It's really crazy that the nostalgia we have for this circus era of the United States overpowers the literal atrocities that this man commit. People died. Calling P.T. Barnum the world's greatest showman is absolutely disgusting, because what he really was a monster. And the way we've cartoonized this depiction of him is insane. Was he a genius marketer? Maybe. But is it actually genius if you're profiting off of hypocrisy, contradiction, and exploitation? If any of these freak show facts rattled you like they should, I would really appreciate it if you checked out the rest of the content on my channel, where I frequently talk about the upsetting and the macabre and overall just the weird and wacky. My name is Melody. This channel is called Melody Ever After. If you enjoyed this video and you've made it until this long, what's stopping me from seeing you in the next one? Until next time.